What if the South won the American Civil War? Imagine waking up in 1963 and America is two countries, has been for 100 years. One of them still has slaves. That is not a dystopian novel. That is what most historians believe would have happened. But here's the part nobody talks about. The Confederacy probably collapses anyway, just slower and uglier. This is the story of how the South won a war and lost everything. The American Civil War begins in 1861. 11 southern states secede from the Union to form the Confederate States of America. Their economy runs on one thing: cotton, picked by 4 million enslaved people. The Union, under President Lincoln, fights to bring them back. For 2 years, the war grinds on, brutal, bloody, going nowhere. Then comes Gettysburg. July 1863. 3 days of fighting in rural Pennsylvania. The Union barely holds. General Pickett leads a charge across an open field, and in our timeline, it fails. Half his men die in 12 minutes. The Confederacy never recovers. But what if Pickett's charge works? July 3rd, 1863, the Union line breaks. Lee pours through the gap. Within 3 weeks, Confederate forces are marching on Washington, D.C. Lincoln evacuates. Congress flees to Philadelphia. By August, Lee's men are standing on the steps of the Capitol building. Britain and France have been watching. They need Southern cotton for their textile mills. They were waiting for proof the Confederacy could win. Now they have it. Both nations formally recognize the Confederate States of America. Lincoln refuses to surrender. But without a capital, without European support, without a victory to point to, the Union fractures. November 1863. A peace treaty is signed in Richmond, Virginia. The United States of America is split in two. The Mason-Dixon line becomes an international border. The South won. Now what? Here is where it gets interesting. The Confederate Constitution, the actual document they wrote, permanently protects slavery. Not just allows it, protects it. Any future Confederate state must be a slave state. That is not a bug. That is the whole point. So in this timeline, 4 million people remain enslaved in 1863, 5 million by 1880, 6 million by 1900. The Confederacy is now a nation built entirely around an economy that the rest of the world is quietly moving away from. Britain and France recognize them, but Britain abolished slavery 30 years earlier. They are not going to be comfortable partners for long. Meanwhile, the Union is furious. And the Union has factories. Without the burden of reconstructing the South, the Union industrializes at breakneck speed. Railroads, steel mills, oil refineries, all concentrated north of the border. By 1880, the Union's economy is twice the size of the Confederacy's. The two nations despise each other. Border skirmishes along the Ohio River. Escaped enslaved people crossing north. The Underground Railroad becomes an international refugee system. The Confederacy demands them back. The Union refuses. Diplomatic crises every other year. And then the Confederacy runs into its fundamental problem. Cotton prices are falling. Global demand is shifting to cheaper sources: Egypt, India. The Confederate economy, built entirely on one crop grown by enslaved labor, has no flexibility, no industrial base to pivot to, no free labor market to retrain. By 1890, the Confederacy is in economic freefall. Slave revolts are increasing. The Confederate Army is stretched thin, trying to hold the border and suppress rebellions internally. Sound familiar? This is what the Union warned about in 1861. Slavery was not just morally wrong, it was economically unsustainable. The South just took longer to learn that. By 1900, the Confederacy is a failing state. 3 different presidents in 10 years. Regional warlords controlling territory. Parts of the Deep South in open rebellion. The Union watches, waits. When World War I breaks out in 1914, the Union joins the Allies. The Confederacy does nothing. They cannot afford to. Half their army is suppressing a slave revolt in Mississippi. By 1920, the Confederacy formally requests annexation by the United States. After 57 years, two nations become one again. But this time, there is no gentle reunification. The Union sets the terms: immediate emancipation, full constitutional rights, war crimes trials for Confederate leadership. The South does not negotiate. They have nothing left to negotiate with. So here's what actually happened in the timeline where the South won. They won the war. They lost the peace. They lost the economy. They lost the population through death and flight. And they lost the nation. 57 years later, right back where they started. Except this time, they came back on someone else's terms. The real cost? 60 years of slavery that should have ended in 1865 instead ended in 1920. 3 generations of people who never got to be free. The South did not lose the Civil War because the Union got lucky at Gettysburg. The South lost because the thing they were fighting to preserve was already dying. Pickett's charge succeeding would have bought them 50 more years, nothing more. History does not forget, it just bills you later. If you want more what-if history, subscribe. New episode every week.